Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you may be. CC here, Chris from New York, Westchester, Canada. I want to congratulate the big boys out there. They're finally doing something that pertains to the flat Earth. That's excellent, guys. Keep up the good work. For example, we got Mark Sargent now talking to somebody from the U.S. Army. I haven't seen the video yet. I was planning on maybe taking a look at it today, listening to it. It was on his radio show. And Jeranism is actually doing something on SpaceX, which we all know is bullshit, but he's doing a good job proving that the live feed was actually altered, which is like incredible to learn about, because in order to do that, you'd have to have Google re-upload your live feed, and it's like next to impossible to have that done. So obviously Google's in on it, and many other social networkings, I'm sure all of them are in on this too. And that's the flat Earth, guys, and that's what I'm talking about, being in on something. They all know, and that is why we're surrounded with lies. So let's start off with Christopher Columbus, who sailed the blues and discovered America. Well, we know he might have discovered America, but he wasn't the first one there. We know the Indians were the first one there. But yet, in school, they will make you think that he was the very first person here who discovered the Americas, okay? More lies for students in school to learn about, and changing history, as they like to say. History. One big story that's made up and manufactured, just like today. Today's February 14th, a manufactured holiday. That's all it is. It's an excuse for you to go out and buy shit. That's all it is. And you're forced to. And if you don't, forget it. You know how many people break up on this date? I can only imagine. I really could. Anyway, on with the history lesson. Let's fast forward now to 1850 or the 1800s, the wild, wild west, where things were so out of control that towns were run by gunslayers and criminals, and basically what we have now, but in a different sense. It was wild. Everything was up for grabs. No telephone, no communication. All you did is you knew everybody in town, and you went on with your lives. Small businesses, very little taxes. I don't think there were taxes even back then at all, as far as I know. There were salaries, and there were trading. Trading was a big thing. And I think we're probably going to get back into that, is trading. Because the currency is going to go out the window, I'm sure, at some point. But you see there, I'm getting off the subject again. So, the 1800s, all right? Now let's fast forward to the Roaring 20s, another manufactured thing. The Roaring 20s, and then the big stock crash, where everybody lost their money. And then we had WW1, WW2, but before that, we had Admiral Byrd, who decided to take a little trip down to Antarctica. I know we're surrounded all around with ice walls, but maybe Antarctica is the only place we can actually... Maybe that's the entrance, Maybe the ice walls that are surrounding us on either side are so enormous and so big, they're just unreachable, and you can't get above them. Unless if you have something like a jetliner or something like that. Maybe that is the entrance all the way down there. And why wouldn't it be? A nice hidden place, Antarctica, nobody knows about, freezing cold. No animals can survive down there except penguins. Why wouldn't they? There's a reason why they have bases down there, and the Navy's down there, and every country's got a representative down there. So, just think about that for a little bit. They needed something to keep us occupied with, because back in the 1800s, we were probably thinking more back then than we've ever thought in our entire lives, because there was no television, there was no radio, there was no media. There was a town newspaper. That was about it. So we thought back then. We thought of ingenious things back then. I admire that generation. I really do. That was the thinking generation. So Admiral Byrd goes down there, discovers something, obviously. Then we had WW1, WW2, more confusion, more way to get power for the country and money for the country, and continue this lie. So apparently he found something down there, and it sparked an interest with all the governments around in the entire world. So they all gathered down there, and then they found something. Admiral Byrd was talking about more land. He was talking about the fruits of coal, gasoline. I mean, all sorts of stuff that's down there. You know, I don't know if I really believe any of that. I think there's something else and more to it, but that would be in my simulation videos. But I don't want to get off the topic, okay, and break my train of thought here. So at that point, the government slowly was developing back in the 40s, back in the 30s. It was developing into what it is now, an entire mess, out of control, and doing whatever the hell they want and telling you what to do. So the 40s come along, and they start to develop taxes, they start to develop jobs, they start to develop careers and schooling and college and master's degree. Well, I don't even think master's degrees were back then, doctrines and stuff like that. But everything was starting to develop and turning into what it is now. Slowly but surely, the 50s come. Television comes. We need something for them to keep themselves occupied and zoned out. Yeah, sure, we had movies back in the 20s and low-budget silent movies and whatever, and they saw that was something that was interesting, that kept us amused. You know, 50s came along and it just roared. Hollywood went through the roof. You know, there were very few Hollywood actors, and they were very well known and very well paid. Not as nearly as what they're paid now, but they were very well paid back then. Color TV comes out, music comes out. All of this distraction starts just twofold, just turning into a snowball of just distractions for all of us. Schooling comes out. The history is being changed. Presidents are being assassinated. You know, I mean, well, we just had one that was assassinated, but shot at, shall we say? You know, and Ronald Reagan, that is. You know, more confusion. The government now is so out of control; it owns everything. You know, it's going to tell you what your business is going to be like, whether you're a billionaire or a multi-millionaire. If they see any spark of money coming up, they control you, all right? And they also control your business. And they're going to tell you where you can build and where you can't build. And you can't do anything down in Antarctica. So you're going to have to sign this treaty, if that makes any sense. Then the 80s comes up. And wow, was that a decade, you know? What a mess that was. That was pretty much the platform for where we are right now, with the music, the drugs, the alcohol. Yeah, it was back in the 60s too, but in the 80s it was very predominant. And the drug lords and the control that was brought up with. And then the government, the lying government, taking everybody's money once again. You know. Then we go into the 90s. We need more distraction. It's not keeping them distracted enough, the government's saying. We need the internet. Now, the internet was invented back in the 40s by the Army. You know, they already had a way to communicate without a telephone. You know, they did have that. It just blew up in the 90s. And that's when all the social networking came out. And I'll get started with that in a minute. So the 90s, the internet starts to develop. Rudimentary, of course. You know, a DOS screen, dial-up, modem, telephone modem. You know, people are able to communicate together, and they're able to, you know, rip games over the internet and you know, steal music and all that stuff. And then the internet just exploded in 97. I don't even think that they knew it was going to do it, but it did. And that is the most indoctrination I have ever seen in my entire life. Because the first thing that offices started doing that had no computers in there, and if they did, it was just big calculators. You know, every office now has a computer inside of it. Every office now has emails inside of it. Every office now require you to even start a social networking thing. You know, more confusion for everybody to keep themselves any thought about the flat earth, if they even think that it's flat, they have no time to think about it with all the confusion that's going on. Hollywood, once again, is way out of control. It's gotten so weird, transvestites. It's gotten every single thing. We don't even know who a man or a woman was when we even were growing up watching them. We find out 35 years that they're transvestites. You don't even know anymore. That's how Hollywood is so weird. The government needed some sort of social networking. They needed to keep track of us. They needed to keep an eye on us. The telephones weren't working. The computers weren't working. Smartphones. We had the cell phone, and it was nothing purely. It was just a phone that you dial people's number with, and it had nothing else on it. Maybe it had text messaging, but people weren't really into that back then. In comes the iPhone. Okay, which has revolutionized the smartphone from the beginning with the touch screen. Everybody wanted one. It was the most popular thing. I did a previous video on it that it hasn't changed in 10 years now, and it will never change because they've reached their peak on that. So, but that's a different video. I don't want to get into that right now. The smartphone comes about. The government now has a way to track us. Even with our smart TVs, that's a tracking device too. Our computers at home is a tracking device too. We're inviting this stuff for the government to track you, okay? And they're tracking every little step that you're taking. There's a file on you. There's a file on me. There's a file on anybody, So if anybody comes up with a really good idea and makes $1 billion, well, they're going to come after you. And they're going to say, hey, let's take a look back into the 1990s when the computer, and let's take a look at what you were looking at in the 1990s. Let's take a look at who you were talking to. Let's take a look at what you were doing on your smartphone. Okay? So all of this is all tied into the flat earth. Everything all the way up to now. It's all developed through the flat earth. Don't globers or whoever you want to call them, realize that if we were spinning on a ball, if we were traveling through space, if everything was as real as you think it is, do you think the government would be as corrupt as it is? They had to start lying from the beginning. They had to invent NASA, which was a complete lie, and that's why it's gone now. And they needed someone else to take it over, a regular person to do it. And here he is. And that's where we are right now. And that's how corrupt everything has gotten. And they needed all of this. And they got it. Now we're at a time right now where the taxes are through the roof. We can't even live in areas that we want to live in, that we grew up in. They've raised the taxes. They've raised everything. And the government is more corrupt than ever. Because if we did live on what we grew up to believe, wouldn't you think our human species would want to help each other? They would want to get smarter. They would want to develop more technology that would help combat diseases, which is a total... Oh, I forgot to even mention that. I realize there's a lot of things I forgot to mention, okay? I could think of 100 right now off the top of my head, but hey, look, I'm just putting this video out there to try to wake more people up about this society and everything that's going on around them. Is tied into the flat earth. And it also could be tied into a simulation too, possibly. But that's a plausible possibility that requires a totally separate video, which I'm working on, of course. When somebody starts lying from the beginning, it just gets worse and worse and worse. And things are made up, and people believe that there's a secret society out there, and maybe there is. I'm sure there is. There has to be. But it just gets so out of control, and that's where we are right now. Where they can come up with... Hollywood can pretty much do anything, and it'll be popular. When you reach a movie star status, you can pretty much do anything. Eat a grasshopper, and you'll get 30 billion views. And that's with a B. Okay? We're beyond millions now, my friend. All right? Billions now. I'm still waiting for the trillionaire. Is there a trillionaire already? Someone's got to have $1 trillion somewhere. It's just so out of control, guys. Happy Valentine's Day, this manufactured holiday. And also the holidays. You see, I forgot to say so many things, but you know what? All right. I thank you for viewing. I thank you for being, there. Thank you for commenting, and I thank you for letting me be a part of your life.